We're drawn to stories of hidden truth, those powerful moments when the masks fall away and people see beyond appearances. Today's story will make your heart race with indignation, then swell with vindication. In a world obsessed with designer labels and social status, one woman's quiet dignity is about to teach Manhattans elite a lesson they'll never forget. The whispers, the side eyes, the condescending smiles, all directed at someone they severely underestimated. What would you do if people judge your worth by your clothing rather than your character? When is the perfect moment to reveal who you truly are? And why do we often value the sparkle of diamonds over the brilliance of intellect? This isn't just another revenge story. It's a powerful reminder about what truly matters in a world blinded by appearances. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to Heartbeat Narratives, your ultimate destination for all things romances, connection, and heartfelt stories. I'm thrilled to have you here, sharing this amazing journey of exploring love in all its beautiful, complex, and magical forms. Whether you're a hopeless romantic, someone searching for relationship insights, or just love diving into heartwarming content, you're exactly where you need to be. If you're enjoying what you see, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could. Hit that subscribe button to stay connected with our Heartbeat Narratives community. Drop a like to show some love, support, and motivation. Share this video with someone who might need a little romance in their life. Your support means the world to me and helps us continue creating content that celebrates love, connection, and the beautiful stories that bring us together. The valet's expression betrayed her confusion as Emma Wilson stepped out of her modest Honda Civic at the entrance of the Blackwood estate, a sprawling mansion nestled among the manicured gardens of the Hamptons. Bathed in the golden glow of sunset, the estate's grandeur was amplified by strings of twinkling fairy lights that adorned the expansive grounds. The air hummed with classical music played by a live orchestra, its melody floating across the meticulously landscaped gardens where champagne-sipping guests draped in designer were congregated in clusters. Emma smoothed down her simple navy blue dress, purchased off the rack from a department store 2 years ago, and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. No stylist had touched her chestnut waves, no makeup artist had contoured her fresh face, and no chauffeur had driven her to this opulent celebration. Her only accessories were a pair of small pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother and a vintage watch that had seen better days. Name, please? A tuxedoed attendant holding a tablet barely concealed his skepticism as he assessed her appearance. Emma Wilson, she replied with quiet confidence, despite the first flurry of whispers erupting around her. The attendant's eyebrows rose slightly as he found her name on the list. Indeed, welcome to Charlotte Blackwood and James Montgomery's wedding, Ms. Wilson. Emma nodded with a polite smile and stepped into the world of New York's elite. The whispers followed her like a shadow. Who invited her? A woman in a dazzling red gown stage whispered to her companion. Probably staff, another replied with a dismissive flick of her diamond-encrusted wrist. Or maybe a charity case. You know how the Montgomerys love their philanthropy projects. Emma pretended not to hear as she navigated through the sea of designer suits and couture gowns. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere? Like I was judging your right to exist in space? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. As Emma made her way toward the main reception hall, Charlotte Blackwood, the bride herself, emerged from a circle of admirers. Charlotte was resplendent in a custom Vera Wang creation, her platinum blonde hair arranged in an intricate updo adorned with diamonds. Her gaze locked on Emma, and her perfectly painted lips curled into what could only be described as a predatory smile. Well, well, Charlotte drawled, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Look who decided to grace us with her quaint presence. The crowd tittered. Emma merely smiled, a glint of something unreadable flickering in her eyes. She knew something they didn't, and for now, that was enough. Emma Wilson had grown up in a small town in Michigan, the daughter of a mechanic and a kindergarten teacher. Brilliant from an early age, she had secured a scholarship to MIT, where she'd first met Marcus Abernathy, whose friendship had persisted through the years and resulted in today's invitation. While at university, Emma had developed an innovative algorithm that revolutionized data processing, leading her to found her own tech company at just 23. But you wouldn't know any of this by looking at her. Unlike her college classmates who flaunted their success with mansions and supercars, Emma maintained a deliberately low profile. She lived in a modest three-bedroom house, drove her reliable Honda, and invested most of her fortune in research, sustainable projects, and anonymous philanthropy. Her name rarely appeared in tech magazines, as she preferred working behind the scenes, letting her innovations speak for themselves. Charlotte Blackwood, in stark contrast, had been born into wealth and had spent her life accumulating more, not in assets or innovations, but in social currency. The daughter of a banking executive, she had leveraged her family connections to build a luxury lifestyle brand that catered exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. Her wedding to James Montgomery, heir to a hotel empire, was less a celebration of love and more a strategic merger of influence and affluence, meticulously designed to be the social event of the season. The 300 guests of the Blackwood estate represented a who's who of New York's elite. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, and old money families whose fortunes stretched back generations. Among them, Emma was an anomaly, invited only because Marcus had insisted to James that his old friend from college be included. Emma? Marcus's voice cut through the tension as he approached, champagne flutes in hand. Tall and distinguished in his tailored suit, he embraced her warmly, oblivious to the stares around them. "I'm so glad you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," Emma replied, accepting the champagne, "though I think I'm causing quite the stir." Marcus glanced around at the curious onlookers. Ignore them. Half these people bought their way onto the guest list anyway. He lowered his voice. "How's the new project going?" "Still changing the world one algorithm at a time." Emma's eyes lit up with genuine passion. "We're close to a breakthrough. The applications for emerging markets could be transformative." Ever the idealist, Marcus chuckled. "That's why I've always—" "Marcus, darling." Charlotte's voice sliced through their conversation as she glided over, a plastered smile on her face. "You simply must introduce me to your friend." The champagne reception was in full swing when Charlotte orchestrated Emma's public humiliation with the precision of a general planning a siege. She clinked her crystal flute with a silver spoon, drawing all eyes to where she stood, strategically positioned next to Emma. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate James and me," Charlotte announced, her voice carrying across the marble-floored hall. "We're especially thrilled that all walks of life are represented here today." Her gaze slid meaningfully to Emma. "It's important to remember one's humble beginnings, isn't it, Emma, dear?" Emma took a sip of her champagne, her composure unshaken. "Absolutely, Charlotte. Humility is a virtue often forgotten in certain circles." Charlotte's smile tightened. "That's such a quaint sentiment. Tell me, what is it that you do again?" Marcus mentioned something about computers. Her tone suggested she was inquiring about a particularly distasteful hobby. "I work in technology," Emma replied simply. "Oh, IT support." "How fascinating," Charlotte exclaimed with exaggerated interest. "Do you help people when their emails won't send?" "I always find those people so helpful when I call the help desk." Titters rippled through the crowd. A woman in a designer pantsuit leaned in. "Charlotte, perhaps she could help you with your Instagram. I noticed you lost followers after that unfortunate filter malfunction." "Or maybe she could explain to James why gaming consoles aren't appropriate wedding gifts," added another, triggering louder laughter. Emma maintained her dignified silence, her slight smile never wavering. It was an expression that confused her mockers. Not embarrassment, not anger, but something like patient amusement, as if she were privy to a joke they couldn't understand. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Actually, Emma—" "It's fine, Marcus," Emma interrupted gently, touching his arm. "I'm perfectly comfortable with who I am and what I do." She turned to Charlotte. "Congratulations again on your wedding. The venue is spectacular." Charlotte frowned, clearly unsatisfied with Emma's reaction. She'd expected tears, or at least discomfort, not this calm self-assurance. As the crowd dispersed, James Montgomery approached. Unlike his bride, he carried himself with genuine warmth, his handshake firm as he greeted Emma. "Don't mind Charlotte," he said quietly. "Wedding stress brings out the worst in people." "You don't need to apologize for her," Emma replied. "No, but I can apologize for myself if I've made you feel unwelcome. Any friend of Marcus is welcome here. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps. That gave Emma pause. Before she could respond, Charlotte appeared at his side, claiming him with a territorial grip on his arm. "Darling, the Vandermoors are looking for you," she said sweetly, steering him away with a final dismissive glance at Emma. As they walked away, Emma overheard Charlotte hiss, "Really, James? Must you be so charitable? People will talk." The seating arrangements for dinner were clearly designed to reinforce the social hierarchy. Emma found herself at what could only be described as a reject table, tucked in a far corner of the ballroom alongside distant relatives no one wanted to claim, business associates too insignificant to offend, and a visibly intoxicated great-uncle who kept confusing her with the catering staff. "So you work with computers?" asked a woman to her left, a cousin of James who had introduced herself as Beatrice. "Yes, in software development," Emma replied, slicing into her herb-crusted salmon. "My son is always on those video games," Beatrice continued. "I tell him, 'Harold, you'll never make a living staring at screens all day.' But perhaps I'm wrong." Her tone suggested she very much doubted it. A distinguished older gentleman across the table leaned forward with interest. "Software, you say? Any company I might know?" "Possibly," Emma answered vaguely. "We're primarily B2B, focusing on data processing optimization and AI integration." The man's eyebrows rose. "Interesting field. I'm on the board of Haventech Industries. We've been looking to overhaul our entire data infrastructure. The legacy systems are becoming untenable." "Haventech? I'm familiar with your operations," Emma said. Her professional interest piqued. "Your manufacturing innovations are impressive, but you're right about the data systems. They're bottlenecking your potential." "Precisely. We consulted with several firms, but the solutions proposed have been—" He hesitated. "Let me guess. Prohibitively expensive and still not addressing the fundamental architecture issues," Emma suggested. The man stared at her with newfound respect. "Exactly. How did you—" "Wilson?" A voice boomed from behind them. A portly man in his 60s with shock of white hair stood there, martini in hand, staring at Emma with widened eyes. "Emma Wilson of Quantum Apex Solutions?" The table fell silent as Emma nodded, a hint of resignation in her smile. "Good God, woman, I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 18 months. The man, Gerald Hoffman, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Your quantum processing algorithms are revolutionizing the entire industry. We'd pay anything for a consultation. Would you reveal your true worth to people who judge you, or keep it hidden? Let me know in the comments." Sometimes the most powerful position is letting others underestimate you until the perfect moment arrives. The commotion attracted attention from nearby tables. Emma noticed Charlotte's head turning, her expression souring as she observed the animated conversation. "Perhaps we could discuss this in a more appropriate setting, Mr. Hoffman," Emma suggested quietly. But Hoffman was too excited to be contained. "Do you know who this is?" he announced at the table. "This woman owns a tech company that developed the processing software most of your businesses are desperately trying to acquire. She's the reason Future Core and Tech Dynamics are scrambling to reinvent their entire operational models." The great-uncle who had earlier asked Emma to bring him more wine nearly choked on his drink. Beatrice's mouth hung open inelegantly. "That's impossible," Beatrice finally managed. "She's wearing a department store dress." Gerald Hoffman laughed heartily. "You think every tech genius dresses like they're at a fashion show? Wilson here could buy this entire estate with what her company makes in a month, and she lets her innovations speak for themselves. That's real confidence, not whatever this circus is." He gestured broadly at the opulent surroundings. Emma sipped her water, maintaining her composure as whispers rippled outward from their table like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Charlotte was midway through her meticulously rehearsed wedding speech when Emma's phone vibrated discreetly in her clutch. She would have ignored it, but the specific pattern indicated an urgent alert from her executive team. Glancing down, she saw the message, "Acquisition complete. For $0.2 billion transfer confirmed." Emma allowed herself a small smile. The deal they'd been working on for months. purchasing a revolutionary clean energy technology that her team planned to develop and distribute at cost to developing nations, had finally gone through. Another step toward her true goal, using her wealth not for display, but for impact. And so, while some of us work to create beauty and inspiration in the world, Charlotte was saying, her gaze drifting pointedly toward Emma, others merely tinker with gadgets in the background. The implied insult hung in the air, but before any awkwardness could settle, Emma's phone chimed again, loudly this time, the sound cutting through Charlotte's carefully crafted pause. All eyes turned to Emma, who apologized quietly as she silenced the device. Charlotte seized the opportunity. Perhaps if you worked in a more sophisticated industry, you'd understand the importance of etiquette at such occasions. Something shifted in Emma's expression, not anger, but a decision. For the first time that evening, she decided that perhaps humility had served its purpose. Sometimes a correction was necessary not for pride's sake, but to realign a distorted perspective. "You're absolutely right, Charlotte," Emma replied, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent room. "Proper etiquette is essential, like acknowledging when you're standing in a building owned by one of your guests." Charlotte faltered. "What are you talking about?" Emma gestured to their surroundings. "Blackwood Estate isn't owned by your family anymore, Charlotte. Vision Harbor Holdings acquired it last year. I'm Vision Harbor's founder and CEO." The revelation dropped like a bomb. James, who had been listening intently, suddenly straightened in his chair, recognition dawning on his face. "That's why your name was familiar," he said. "You're that Emma Wilson. The one who what?" Charlotte demanded, her perfect composure cracking. Before James could answer, an older gentleman rose from his seat. William Montgomery, James's father and the patriarch of the Montgomery Hotel empire. He made his way deliberately toward Emma, the room watching in tense silence. "Ms. Wilson," William Montgomery said, his voice rough with emotion as he reached for her hand. "I owe you my gratitude and, it seems, a proper introduction to my son and his bride." Charlotte looked between them in confusion, her speech forgotten. "What's happening, William?" The older man turned to address the room at large, but his eyes remained on Emma. "Many of you know that Montgomery Hotels faced significant challenges last year. What you don't know is that we were weeks away from bankruptcy when an anonymous buyer saved us with an emergency investment." Murmurs swept through the crowd as William continued. "That buyer stipulated only 2 conditions: that all staff remain employed and that the Montgomery family continue to lead the company. I never knew who our savior was, until now." All eyes turned to Emma, who looked almost embarrassed by the attention. "You," Charlotte whispered, her voice barely audible, "but you look so ordinary." "That's $3 billion of ordinary, Mrs. Montgomery." Gerald Hoffman called out cheerfully from his table, raising his glass in Emma's direction. William shook his head, a wry smile on his weathered face. $3 billion? Gerald, you're behind on your industry news. Ms. Wilson's latest valuation puts her net worth closer to $22 billion. The collective gasp was audible. Charlotte sank slowly back into her chair, her face drained of color. "Quantum Apex Solutions," William continued. "Ms. Wilson's company recently developed a quantum encryption protocol that half the people in this room are desperately trying to license for their businesses. The other half are using her consumer applications without even realizing it." Emma finally stood, uncomfortable with being the center of such attention. "Mr. Montgomery, please. This is Charlotte and James's day, not a business forum." "No, I think this needs to be said," William insisted, "because I've watched all evening as you were treated like an outsider, while you've shown nothing but grace. That's a lesson in character this gathering sorely needs." Charlotte, recovering her poise, rose and approached Emma with an entirely new demeanor, the hostess mask firmly back in place. "Emma, dear, clearly there's been a misunderstanding. Had you known I was wealthy, you would have treated me differently," Emma finished for her. "And that's precisely the problem, isn't it?" The grand ballroom had fallen into a hushed silence as Emma stood, commanding attention not through volume, but through the quiet authority that had built her empire. "I didn't come here to disrupt your celebration," she began, addressing Charlotte and James, but aware her words were reaching every ear in the room. "And I certainly didn't come to announce my financial status. That has never been who I am." She glanced around to faces watching her, some curious, some embarrassed, some calculating as they reassess her value to their networks. "I grew up watching my father fix cars for 14 hours a day, coming home with grease under his fingernails that never quite washed away," Emma continued. "My mother taught kindergarten for 30 years, shaping young minds on a salary that barely covered our needs. They taught me that wealth isn't what you display. It's what you build, what you share, and most importantly, who you are when no one's looking." Charlotte shifted uncomfortably in her couture gown that cost more than what many families made in a year. "When I founded my company, I made a choice," Emma said. "I could live in a mansion with staff to attend to my every need, or I could remember where I came from and use my resources for something meaningful. I chose the latter. My greatest luxury isn't possessions, it's freedom. Freedom to choose impact over impression." She turned directly to Charlotte now. "You mock me for my appearance, assuming I was beneath you. But true wealth isn't measured in designer labels or social media followers. It's measured in purpose, in contribution, and yes, in how we treat those we believe can do nothing for us." The weight of her words pressed down on the glittering assembly. Some guests studied their champagne flutes with sudden interest, while others nodded almost imperceptibly. "I apologize for disrupting your special day," Emma concluded. "And despite how this evening began, I wish you both happiness in your marriage. Marriage, after all, is one place where appearances mean nothing compared to substance." She raised her glass in a simple toast, then set it down and prepared to leave. James stepped forward. "Please don't go, Ms. Wilson. I think everyone here could benefit from your presence a little longer." He turned to face his bride. "Charlotte, you invited everyone you thought was important to witness our union. It turns out one of the most significant people here is someone you dismissed." Charlotte's face flushed with embarrassment and something else, perhaps the first glimmer of genuine self-reflection she'd experienced in years. I apologize, Emma. My behavior was inexcusable." Emma nodded in acknowledgement, but offered no absolution. Some lessons needed to be felt to be learned. As the evening progressed, Emma noticed a shift in the room's energy. Guests who had previously ignored her now sought her out, though she recognized the opportunism behind most approaches. A few, however, engaged with genuine interest in her work, particularly her foundation's efforts to bring technology education to underserved communities. What does true wealth mean to you? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community of thoughtful storytellers who believe in the power of authentic living and meaningful success. The wedding reception continued into the night, transforming into something that felt, at least to Emma, more authentic than its beginning. She stayed longer than she'd planned, engaged in conversation with William Montgomery about potential collaborations to use as hotel properties as training centers for young people entering the tech industry. "You know," William said thoughtfully, "in all my years in business, I've observed that those who need to flaunt their success are usually the most insecure about it." Emma smiled. "And those most secure rarely feel the need to announce themselves." "Precisely why I never knew it was you who saved my company," he replied. "Your anonymity spoke volumes about your character." As the evening wound down, Emma prepared to leave, retrieving her simple clutch purse from the cloakroom. She was surprised to find Charlotte waiting near the exit, alone for the first time that evening, her perfect makeup slightly smudged from the long day. "I wanted to catch you before you left," Charlotte said, a vulnerability in her voice that hadn't been there before. "What you said earlier, it made me realize how empty all of this is." She gestured vaguely at the opulence around them. "It's not empty if it brings you joy," Emma replied carefully. "The problem is when we use these things to measure our worth, or worse, to measure others." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I've spent my whole life climbing a social ladder that felt so important. But looking at you, what you've built, who you are without needing everyone to know it, it makes me question everything." "That questioning is valuable, Charlotte. Far more valuable than any wedding gift you'll receive tonight." After a moment's hesitation, Charlotte asked, "How do you do it? Live simply when you could have everything." I do have everything, Emma corrected gently. Purpose, impact, freedom from others' expectations. That's true abundance. She handed Charlotte a business card, simple, unembellished. If you're ever interested in seeing what real influence looks like, my foundation is always looking for partners who want to make a difference, not just an impression. With that, Emma stepped out into the cool night air. The valet brought around her Honda Civic, which now drew curious glances from departing guests who understood what that choice represented. Not necessity, but principle. As she drove away from the glittering lights of Blackwood Estate, Emma reflected on the evening's unexpected turn. She hadn't come to teach anyone a lesson, but perhaps one had been learned nonetheless. In a world obsessed with appearances, sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply being authentic. The true measure of wealth, after all, wasn't in what you possessed, but in who you were when all possessions were stripped away. By that measurement, Emma Wilson was indeed the richest person at the wedding, not because of the billions in her accounts, but because of the values that guided how she used them. Back in her modest home, Emma kicked off her shoes and made herself a cup of tea. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to create technology that mattered, and new chances to use her fortune not as a trophy, but as a tool. And that, to her, was the greatest luxury of all. The freedom to make a difference without needing the world's applause for doing so. The notifications on her phone continued to flash. New connection requests from wedding guests, messages from business leaders who had suddenly remembered their acquaintance, invitations to exclusive events she had never been considered for before tonight. Emma smiled as she silenced the device and placed it face down on her nightstand. Some forms of wealth, she knew, were too profound to be captured in a balance sheet or displayed at a wedding. And those were the forms that mattered most.